Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of my tactical analysis. Gully, I've been joined and supported ably by Dan Butler today. You remember Dan from doing the summer transfer window podcast where we reviewed Wolves' transfer plans and developed a squad akin to something that may or may not have succeeded had we gone down that route. Obviously, Wolves, I don't think actually signed a single player that myself or Dan referenced in that podcast. So you can either take that as us being wildly optimistic in our assertions, or maybe they should have listened to us in the first place. But Dan, really nice to have you with me. How you keeping?
Yeah, it wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement of our scouting skills, was it, or talent ID? I'm all right, mate. Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm doing as well as you can do for someone whose football club is just in seemingly complete disarray. So yeah,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying in terms of the talent ID, but I actually think we did all right based on how some of the players have fared, how some of them haven't so far.
might have been a bit
But
pie in the sky from me mentioning a 70 million euro striker, but
yeah, you
we'll go past that one quite quickly, I think.
you can definitely take Nick Voltemata as a successful kind of identification of a player.
Yeah.
Whether he was likely to join Wolves is a different matter altogether. But based on how the transfer window transpired, I guess you know the whole thing was a pretty useless exercise in the end. But we hope people gleaned something from it and enjoyed it. But we will touch on a little bit around squad profiles and something that Vitor obviously spoke about in the week actually, which I think will alarm some people. But really, Dan and I want to get under the skin of some of the discourse that's been had over the last few weeks. Talk about back threes versus back fours, how the two systems do or do not work for Wolves at this moment in time with the squad that we've got available to us. How Vitor has tried to implement those shapes and successfully or unsuccessfully at the moment, highly unsuccessfully, of course, but really trying without wanting to kind of into a position of ranting and raving about it. Um, just give a little bit more context and detail around why things aren't necessarily working for us at this moment in time, what we could potentially do better, and also if we have a chance in hell of staying up, I guess. But to kick off, I think Daniel, we spoke before recording about you've been kind of having some thoughts around the two systems and how we're playing at the moment. What's your kind of general take on the back three versus the back four debates?
I think it's a good question. Yeah, like you say, it's something that I'd gone away and tried to have a little look at more objectively. I think from week to week we sort of see the discourse start up again. Should we be in a back three? Should we be in a back four? It's been a blessing and a curse that when Nuno arrived, he deployed it and deployed it at possibly its best quality we'll ever see at Wolves. Because I think what came with it was a defensive solidity, and when things are going badly as they are now, naturally people were thinking, surely this is the way we need to go. We need to fall back on this. It's tried and tested, and when we know that it's Vitor's preferred system as well, it's sort of goes without saying that it'd probably be the route that we'd go. The slightly odd thing, or sort of the contrary to that, is that we've started to look just a little bit more solid in a back four, and it's not really made any sense. I don't know whether it's a combination of he's actually stumbled upon something by complete chance. I don't know whether there was a thought in his brain during the summer transfer window that maybe we do have the personnel to try this out, but things they don't feel like it, but things are slightly better than possibly we think they are, at least defensively. I think going forward, we'll come onto at some point. It is pretty dire, and the two systems don't really make much difference there, from what I can tell. But defensively, there have been signs of life, I would say, since we switched to the four.
Yeah, it's a unique situation, I think, that we have such an abundance of options towards the back end of the pitch, and we can go into the sense behind that or lack of sense, whichever way you prefer to think. But given that we have so many different types and combinations of centre halves, you'd like to think there is something that we could land upon within that works. Um, the irony being that having set up with the back three ever since Vitor walked through the door, that kind of comfort blanket shape that Wolves fans insist on utilising and really reverting back to. I think the really strange thing about it is that we've seemed to operate better with Santi Bueno, who would probably not have been in anybody's starting line at the start of the season. I don't think. Vitor himself has highlighted him as a player who had the option to leave in the summer as well, and almost left under Gary O'Neill the summer prior to, and Ladislav Krejci as well, who obviously came in slightly later, was actually in the team as a midfielder on his full debut against Newcastle, um, and that despite the idea of a Emmanuel Agbadou, Totti, and Yerson Mosquera back three being something that fans were quite looking forward to seeing as well, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's almost a case of, like you say, it's quite a unique situation we find ourselves in where we have that many options at the back. But it's almost a too many chefs situation where he's got so many options that he doesn't know what to choose from. And so intuition tells you that with that many centre backs on the books and knowing that Vitor prefers the back three, we're gonna play those three centre backs and have the two wing backs supporting them. But through a combination of poor form in Agbadu's case and, in my opinion, just possibly not quite being ready in Mosquera's case, it's meant that he's had to fall back on the four. And look, like you say, Bueno was nowhere near the front of anyone's minds when we were sort of in pre-season and thinking what that defensive setup was going to look like. But you can't say he hasn't earned his place in the team now. He's built something of a partnership with Craigie, who was like, I think you were one of the early ones to say he was never going to be a midfielder in this setup. He needed to be the centre back. He needed to be that progressive passer that we've not really had properly since probably Romain Saiss. I think he does that role very well. Um, and yeah, I guess now we find ourselves where we've got a load of options at the back, but who's gonna displace those two at centre half at the moment?
Yeah, I think Sace is a nice little kind of proxy, I think, for Krejci as a player because he has obviously that better ability to slot into the midfield. We know Sace made his name as a Wolves player in that position alongside Ruben Neves in that promotion campaign. But for me, he basically is kind of remains Sace reincarnated in terms of even his stature, his build. He's got kind of leadership qualities that align with Sace's. He's got a bit of edge, I think, and also an eye for goal that Sace would always pop up with a useful header here and there, and which I think speaks to a general kind of downgrading in the expectations of what a good player. I know Krejci has started well. I also wonder how well he would have been perceived in any other better Wolves team versus the kind of standard of player that has come into the club this summer and just the general standard of the squad. That's not to kind of discredit the fact that he's come into a new league and settled in relatively well. Obviously, notwithstanding the own goal, which was really, really unfortunate. I actually think the back four suiting us better has come about not necessarily on a system basis, but a personnel basis, which I was really adamant that Krejci needed to play in the back line sooner rather than later. But also Andre kind of playing in midfield. It was a really, I know it seemed to be the case that Vitor wanted to make a bit of an example of Andre at one point. But when you look back to the Leeds game, Krejci and João Gomez as a central midfield pairing doesn't strike me as the kind of setup that is likely to go out and dominate, even in especially against a trio of midfielders like Leeds set up with. So just them two kind of reverting to type and being a bit more naturally placed. I think that's as much as a benefit to the team as changing to the back four, if it is the case that the back four has helped us.
Yeah, I think as well is when you consider things that Vitor said previously, where he's talked about how he likes to invite pressure onto the back line and in midfield, where hopefully it opens up gaps in the setup of the opposition. You want to have players at every level of the pitch who are comfortable on the ball, and putting Craigie in the back line means that he's press resistant. and he's going to be able to play out from the back as a result. And then having Andre come back into the team, like you say, once Vitor had made whatever point he wanted to make with him, it means that we do have, or we should at least in theory have some semblance of ball progression through the side that we may not have had if Craigie was stuck in midfield and Andre was sat on the bench.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the back three, Agbadu, transformative player for us last season. I still think, as an individual, he's probably our best defender. Yeah, the
Yeah,
guy you'd
agreed.
want to go in 1-to-1 against any striker in the world and say, if you had to pick one of the six that we've got, he's the one you'd ask to do that kind of man marking job and to go toe to toe with someone. Um, what do you think? Do you think the back three has provided systemic issues, or is it the fact that we've had a real kind of calamitous bunch of individual errors that have left us in bad positions in games?
I think I'm going to have to sit on the fence a little bit, which I appreciate is the boring, easy way out. I don't think anyone could have foreseen the sort of drop off in Agbadu's sort of ability on the ball. I maintain I don't think he's actually been bad off it. I think defensively he's still probably close to what we thought he was last season, but you can't legislate for the lazy passing. He's just the weight of his passing to me is what worries me the most. It feels like it's half-assed, for lack of a better term. And even if we're not getting punished from it, he's putting his teammates in trouble, and all of a sudden we're backpedaling just because he's not put enough on a pass. But yeah, there are systemic issues as well. I think we'll probably come onto it, or we'll definitely come onto it a little bit later in terms of what the knock-on effect is further up the pitch. But just personnel wise, the build up from the back with those three, if it's three centre backs, is just it's not worked for us. And when we don't have the ball as well, I think we look more open when we have the three rather than the four.
Yeah, I think all systems are kind of symbiotic, right? There's always this kind of knock-on effect of attack, not being able to retain the ball probably obviously increases the pressure on the defence. And we've spoken at length about the fact that someone like Totti Gomez benefited from Ryan Aït-Nouri being out wide to him. Nelson Semedo probably has quite a similar benefit to whoever's playing on that right hand side as well. He was, you know, I think we're really missing him as much as someone like Aït-Nouri and obviously Cunha. And when the ball does come forward into the players that we've got ahead of the ball at this moment in time, there just probably just isn't that trust there that Agbadu had last season to say, if I zing it into X player, they're going to secure it. They're going to make sure it moves on instead of coming back to me or whatever. So you wonder what kind of things are going through his head when he is, like you say, taking the weight off these passes. It's the kind of thing you do when you're playing, five-a-side with your mates. You've got a slightly weaker player, on your team. Don't test their first touch and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
it feels like
you're
it shouldn't be
adjusting
happening at
what
the
you
top
do.
end of the game, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You adjust what you're doing on the ball because you're not 100% sure, like you say, the target of your pass is going to be able to trap it quickly enough and progress the play. And there's an elephant in the room here, and I'm not going to bring him up too early because I think you know he gets his fair amount of stick, and I'm guilty of it. But he's one of the examples where you know Agbadu will get his head up and he'll look ahead of him and he'll think, I don't feel as confident playing this ball in with enough power on it or whatever it might be, where we can turn and go. Maybe he has to take a little bit off of it, and it gives the opposition time to just snap in there and win the ball back. And even if they don't win it back, they just break us down a little bit and force us back, and all of a sudden they're sort of petting us in a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, for me, back threes, I played in them, growing up as a kid and stuff like that. I used to play as a sweeper. And, for those that know me, will be surprised to hear I was actually pretty quick back in the day. But, Agbadu having being in that slot in the middle always allowed us to be higher up the pitch
Yeah,
and, take that extra risk with spacing behind and stuff. And what I always felt was my two centre halves that were either side of me can go and be as aggressive as they liked, frankly, because look, you've got your insurance policy. and that's the thing I feel like we haven't necessarily taken advantage of um, in the early parts of this season, which is why I don't buy into the narrative around back three being negative. I think it can be a really positive system if you're looking to press high, push your wing backs on, which is what we did last season. And Vitor seems to have kind of come away from that, perhaps again in a conservative manner because he understands that there is a general downgrade in the quality of play that he has available to him. But I don't see us without getting bodies into the final third scoring goals. And we'll come on to the attack shortly. But do you think there's anything else defensively? I mean, box defending seems to have been a problem. Crosses into the box we've really suffered from. Back three shapes I think can cause some issues when you've got three centre halves, knowing which man to pick up and things like that.
Yeah, we saw quite a few examples of it, didn't we? I think the West Ham, was it their opener in the Cup, springs to mind, where it just felt like none of them were communicating. And was it Bowen or was it Paqueta who, it was vice versa, one of them set the other up, was just able to ghost in, like, and no one had even clocked that they were making the run. And like you say, when you do have that extra body there, it's more likely to happen. There's going to be more communication issues, I think. I think just going back to the point you made about, back threes inherently being more negative. I agree completely. It doesn't have to be that way. I think there are so many examples of back threes being progressive or aggressive or whatever it might be. I think back to when Sheffield United even came up to the Prem. I think Wilder had overlapping centre backs. Like, this was some sort of
Mm.
futuristic system that no one had seen previously, and no one could deal with it as a result. It made John Egan look like one of the best centre backs in the league. But, on the other the flip side of that, if you think about a Sean Dyche 4-4-2, and look, I understand the clamour that people have got for him to have come in for Vitor in the last couple of weeks. It's not going to happen now, but you can't honestly tell me that four at the back that Sean Dyche deploys is a fluid attacking system. It's two banks of four. It's sitting deep. It's barely any gaps between your lines of defense, midfield, and attack. I think people get it into their head when they think extra centre back or extra defender, whatever it might be, that has to be more negative, and we've got enough proof in front of us, both at Wolves previously when Nuno was in charge, and other case studies where we can say that isn't true anymore.
Yeah, and I think that the Tottenham game for me was the biggest example of that because it was very distinct because at half time he made that change, brought on Agbadu, he released the wing backs. Chachua came on, I think, at the same time, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken. And he's the guy you want to be able to get up and down and utilise his pace and stuff. He had a really good second half. Probably his best performance aside from maybe Brighton. And then you get the flip side, which is the transition that happened at Brighton. And it's hard to kind of, you know, make sense of how it happens one occasion. I guess the difference being we went 1-0 up after we made the transition versus Spurs. We were already in the lead at the point that we made the transition against Brighton. Um, and there's probably just some kind of player psychology going on there that really we need to knock out of our systems.
yeah. There's definitely some game state stuff there, and I think when you get to that Brighton game, confidence is low. If you're on that pitch, you want to look over at your manager and know that he's got faith that whatever's seen you take the lead, and it was a massive slice of luck that got us there in the first place. Um, but that he trusts you to, you know, carry out the plan that he's set out pre-game, and that that's gonna see you through and get you the 3 points. There's been a load of studies done previously in terms of teams taking the lead and then deciding to drop 10 to 15 yards, for example, and all the data tells you that you shouldn't be doing that. You should be sticking to what got you the lead in the first place. And like you say, there'll be a psychological aspect of that where players know that all of a sudden they're not going to get the chances on the break as frequently. They're going to be doing a lot of running. They know that they're going to be pressing for their lives. And, come 70, 75, 80 minutes, they're more than likely going to be knackered. You can be a professional footballer all you want. You being asked to do that much running, you're going to tire out at some point.
Yeah, it's a massive quandary. Look, I know we'll probably end up landing in the same spot as most people are suggesting now, which is the lack of quality is what's most hindering us. But I think we're both in agreement that we can still utilize the tools available to us in a better way, um, which I think brings us on to the attack. And considering obviously the fact that threes and fours and the knock on effects that has, what have you made of our attack in general at this point in the season?
Um, I'm trying to think if I'm trying to be a little bit more positive than horrendous, but I don't think I can manage it. The most alarming thing to me is that there's just not a consistent pattern of play we can rely on that is going to fashion us a chance. Now, look, this doesn't have to be something that guarantees you a shot quality of higher than 0.5 xg. Do you know what I mean? It's not. It doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be guaranteed that it's a high quality opportunity. But it doesn't feel like the players, both in the back line and even going forward, have an idea from phase to phase of what they're meant to be doing. So sometimes we might go long from the goal kick. Sometimes we might play out. The ball might come to the right wing back, for example, or the right back in the four at the back. Played short into Arias on the touchline, and all of a sudden I'm seeing, Matt Doherty in his 30s going beyond Arias as one of our most advanced forwards. That to me is not putting our best players, our most creative players, the players who are going to win us matches in areas where they're going to be at their most effective. And that is ultimately, beyond anything else, a coaching thing. We can bemoan quality at times, and there is no doubt that there's been a huge drop off in terms of having the likes of Eight Nori or Cunha drag us up the pitch last season. But the biggest issue at the moment is that the Ariases of the world, the Fer Lopez, whoever it might be, they're not operating in the areas that we want them to be in. I don't want to see John Arias hugging the touchline. The touchline acts as an extra marker. It's going to stop what he does well, which is get the ball and turn his man and go. It's just going to be impossible for him. He needs to be in field in these half spaces and being able to do stuff in those areas. And that's going to be the biggest issue that Vitor has going forward, because he has placed so much value on the physical attributes of players the players who have come in over what I think is the technical side of them, and we're sort of paying the price at the moment.
Right, so I wanted to have a look at John Arias in more depth because I think partially because in theory he is the marquee attacking signing, the obviously in quotation marks the Cunha replacement as a senior guy who plays in the forward line, who we're looking to score goals, create goals, etc. And the utilisation of him, I think, is a massive issue which needs addressing. Um, I've got four fixtures here where he's been used in a number of different positions, but to begin with, it was the Carabao Cup win against Everton, and you referenced straight away that you've got Arias hugging the touchline, getting lots and lots of touches in very very wide areas. That's not more apparent than in that touch map there on the left. Um, I actually think he played okay in that game, despite that. I mean, he had an influence on the goal because it was his shot that was parried out for Menezes to score. Um, but my my I'm lacking an understanding of what Vitor is expecting of him by being in those positions because he's not a get it and square up his man and beat him kind of guy. He's not got that explosive pace that's gonna carry him 30, 40 yards. So when and the other issue being the way we play just means he's kind of getting like a straight pass off a fullback half the time. Yeah, or just a spray out wide from a midfielder with him trying to give himself 5 yards against the fullback as opposed to connecting with players inside and that kind of thing. That's the back four. When we look at the transition into a back three, and Spurs I would say is probably his best game. I mean, he had 86 touches in that game, which is phenomenal for a forward player. Without, I would say, being you know really demanding of the ball, like in the way that Cunha might have been, and the way that kind of everyone's kind of subservient to Cunha in many ways, especially under Vitor. He was just linking play really, really nicely, having a good kind of relationship with his teammates and stuff. And you can see, especially having spent a half in the back three shape, how that probably enabled him a little bit. You then go to Brighton, and again, we've gone back for clearly has a little bit more license to go and explore a little bit. Um, but again, spent a little bit of time in the back three shape, which probably supported why he has roamed a bit. And then we've gone back to Sunderland, and he's marooned out on the flank again. So, I mean, first of all, I guess what have you made of Arias to date, and how much of it is him and his abilities, and the platforming of him by the coach?
Um, look, I think it's fair to say we're all pretty disappointed up to this point. He has played a lot of football, so I think you have to take that into consideration. And he's not Cunha, so to have that as the barometer for how he's performing, I think is quite a difficult bar to set for him. Um, in terms of how much is it due to how much how he's being platformed, I think I'm going to get tired of saying this thing, but I am going to have to lay it mainly at Vitor's door. Like if you look at those maps, the touch maps, you'd like to think that as he gets more comfortable, and this is Vitor I'm talking about here, as he gets more comfortable with this squad and what they're capable of, strengths, weaknesses, where they're going to perform best, that we start to see these touch maps be little bit more consistent. So he's picking up the ball in the same areas against whatever opposition it might be. Now there will be some variance there because teams set up differently. There are different systems to deal with. That's fine, but to go from that Spurs game or even the Brighton one, to be fair, which has touches in slightly more promising areas, I think, to what we saw against Sunderland is worrying because to me it smacks of a manager who still isn't sure what he's looking for from his main creator. Um, the other thing that jumps out at me is just the complete lack of touches in and around that zone 14 area, which is around the D and just slightly inside the box. That's where you want your creators to be on the ball and making things happen, whether it's a shot, whether it's a pass, whatever it might be. Maybe he's just drawing a foul, getting us up the pitch and winning a free kick, taking some pressure off the back line. There's just a complete lack of touches in and around that area. Where he is getting the ball is ineffective, and usually he's got his back to his marker and he's having to go sideways or backwards. And it's not, again, in areas where he can affect the game and be at his best. I think my worry about Arias is that he's 28 as well, and time's not on our side here. Like, forget the overarching, world-ending fear that we might be going down, or we're more than likely going down. There's not a lot of resale value here either, and we are quite good at platforming talent. The reason we managed to get as much money as we did for Cunha or Nunes or Ait Nouri is because we put them in positions where they could best showcase their talent, and when it was time to move on, we could get a good fee for them. What clubs are looking at Arias here and thinking, yeah, this is a player we want to spend 20-25 mil on? So in the worst case scenario where we do need to get rid, we can make our money back off him. We're not putting him in a position to succeed on the pitch, and we're also shooting ourselves in the foot going forward because the value is going to diminish quickly if other clubs start to see this and think, yeah, this guy can't hack it at this level.
Yeah, I think some of this is there's a relationship thing. You've always, down the right, down the flanks, you always expect there to be a relationship between players and stuff. And on the one, I think the Brighton game, it was Chachua played at right back, is obviously going to
Yeah,
be a little bit more adventurous. And then against Sunderland, you got um, Doherty
Doc.
playing the majority of the game at least. And that can't not be a factor if you've got one player that might go down the outside of you. versus one that doesn't. You've got Minetti kind of floating around in that space, generally speaking, probably just looking to plug gaps. And if Arias does come inside, maybe he fills in where he was to go out and put pressure on the ball and that sort of stuff. But it just there isn't a thread that you can necessarily follow that says this is how Vitor wants us to play. And he was very keen to parrot Nuno in many ways and talk about identity. We went from Gary O'Neill, who was quite, you know, game bespoke at times, to try and be more rigid and more consistent. And I think the players benefited from that consistency and rigidness. Obviously, in the back end of last season, we knew, generally speaking, what was expected of them every week. Um, but now he just seems to be kind of be tossing and turning between different ideas. So it's really, really confusing. I mean, it all kind of leads to this seeming ploy to just be a bit of a get the ball in the box kind of team. And I mean, I tweeted about it the other day. Last season, we were third bottom in the entire Premier League for the number of crosses that we were putting into the box. At this point, we're actually sixth in the entire league, which for a team who isn't getting into the final third a lot still suggests that is a very much, plan A. We're putting in crosses every 5.9 touches that we get in the final third, which to my mind feels, especially given the quality that we're seeing, when you look at it visually, it just feels like we're just hoping and praying stuff's going to happen for us in the penalty area.
It's almost like he's seen how good we are at winning the second ball in the sort of defensive and middle thirds of the pitch and thought, go on, we'll have a go at that and see if it works in the box as well. And if something falls, something falls. You know, Munetsi gets a scissor kick against Sunderland and maybe that drops in by some miracle. Yeah, it
But that,
just,
but that in itself, it tells a story because we're
the
playing
wrong
to the
man's on the
strengths
end of
of
the
some of our
chances. Yeah.
weakest players, right? Like we're platforming the
Yeah.
wrong people.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
I think we could spend another half hour or hour talking about Munetzi's strengths and weaknesses, but there's no doubt that he does his best work off the ball. Um, and if he is getting two shots away, like he did against Sunderland, one of which was a 30-yard one that trickles out almost for a throw in, and the other one's a scissor kick, and what are we doing here? How is, or what I should say, is being spoken about pre-game or in the build-up in the week before a game to say, lads, I want you to put XYZ passes together, and the culmination of that phase is going to be that Marshall Munetsi gets a volley from the edge of the box, and that's going to be our shot from that attack. It can't be. It just can't be. And like you say, it does play into that idea that it's a whip it in and hope. I did have a quick look at Hugo Bueno earlier on today, and per FB Ref, his crossing has like gone through the roof, like in terms of the amount of crosses he's putting in versus how many he was last season for Feyenoord. And I think we were all quite excited by the prospect of that because we all probably saw the same clip. I think it was when they went to the San Siro and he whipped it in, and it was unbelievable delivery. We've not seen that this season. It's lacked quality, and we can keep trying it and hope that it works at some point, and maybe it will fall at some point. Maybe all of a sudden Strand Larsen starts getting ahead of his man, and we score bags of goals from this approach. But at the minute, we're throwing mud at the wall and seeing what's going to stick, and nothing stuck.
Yeah, Bueno, to be fair to him, I think it surprised me in terms of just the fact that he's been kind of robust enough to last. The minutes that he's played so far, and seemingly fended off the challenge of Motherwolf as well. And the fact he's managing to get as many crosses into the box as he is, I wasn't always sold on his ability to beat his man and stuff, especially like when you've been watching Nate Nuri do it repeatedly over the course of the last few seasons. Um, but he is also relatively one-dimensional in the sense that if the ball goes out to him, that's basically what's going to happen. I remember watching the Leeds game. I think he came on in the Leeds game, and we'd obviously reverted to a Rockadari and Larson up top as a pair with Menezzi in behind. I mean, I don't wish to um, you know disparage anyone, but genuinely, what the fuck was that about? Um, and
I'm glad you
they
said it
just
because
took,
if that gets clipped up, I can just hold my hands up and say, ah, it's fine. It wasn't
yeah,
me.
but it was just they just took two men out on the flank, stopping Hugo Bueno from crossing the ball because they were 3-1 up and they didn't need to worry about anything else, right?
No, of
Which
course.
was
I mean, yeah.
alarming. It was genuinely alarming. So, um, I'd like to think that they're working on more than that in the week, and that the two big lads who don't really complement each other in any way isn't going to be some sort of. Oh, no, we could talk about Burnley shortly, but there seems to be this idea that as long as we can overpower people in the penalty area, we're going to get success.
I mean, have you seen anything from, granted, it's been spells of 10, 15, 20 minutes at a time. Have you seen anything from those two playing together that makes any sense whatsoever? There's, you know, back when we had Raul and Jota playing up top together, it made sense. But I've not seen anything that makes me think that Tolo and Strand can play together in a 4-4-2 just because they're two big lads and they'll be able to potentially
No,
put it on the centre backs.
but this is another seeming blind spot from Vitor, and we're getting into ranting territory now. But we don't play in behind teams, and we don't transition, we don't counter attack at all. So if you're basically taking two major parts of an attacking unit's armory away from them because we're not able to utilize those two methods, right? So then you do become incredibly one dimensional. You're looking at a defense that can squeeze right up against you, leave space in behind teams, stop your midfield from playing off the back of it, um, and just put it on you in a way that if they were checking their shoulders for, perfect example of Diogo Jota nipping in behind, even Huang, who has been another player who, despite being vilified by the fans, I think still has some uses, marooned out on the flank again. I was looking at his data, and his most successful season as a Wolves player was obviously under Gary O'Neill. Granted, he was playing down the middle as a nine, as a bit of a makeshift player, but he was getting on the ball. He was having four touches in the penalty area per 90, and he's down to less than two in the minutes that he's played this season. He's basically useless outside of the penalty area as a footballer, right? But he's getting loads and loads of touches, and that's just again not where you want Hwang Chan in any shape or form.
I did see a some data go up on Twitter earlier this week that had sort of just a matrix of what forwards in the Premier League were doing, and whoever put it up obviously wasn't a Wolves fan, but it was to do with touches and where players were getting them, and they had Huang circled as basically an attacking midfielder, and I thought if that's the way that our players are being platformed, like you say, then we really are in trouble, because Huang's never been an attacking midfielder in his life, and going back to the sort of touches in the box point, I haven't looked at this, but I'd be interested to see what our touches in the box were like this from this season. I can't imagine anyone's getting particularly high on that metric.
As individuals, it's actually there's so Strand Larsen's kind of held steady. We're having it's gone up from 19.2 to 21.4 per 90 at this point, that was another follow up tweet from what I'd said about the crossing thing.
I was about to say, yeah, I'm assuming that's as a result of just first contact on crosses, and it's not particularly high quality stuff.
No, no, it's absolutely not. I think that's pretty evident from what we're watching, right? So, um, yeah, just like an alarming amount of issues. But the probably the most concerning thing I think was what Vitor said in his press conference after the Sunderland game about we have the players for 3-4-3. We're playing with a four, and we're trying to find solutions with the wingers. I mean, we did a whole podcast right on squad planning and fitting a system and having various options in various positions. It blows my mind that a Premier League manager is sitting here saying that, having managed that window. If it was another manager squad, you could argue, fine, like that's obviously not your plan, but it was all his doing.
Yeah, and I took so much shit at the time for saying managers shouldn't have this much say in transfer windows,
Mm.
and it's like being or feeling vindicated in what's happened as a result has never felt so rubbish, because obviously the result is that we're bottom of the league with 2 points and in all manner of trouble. Um, it's unfathomable. I cannot understand how we've flipped the switch to go from, yeah, do you know what, we will squad build exclusively for this back three where we play two tens and go from there with no consideration for, you know, even forget where we are now, just for a team deciding 6 months down the line or finding out 6 months down the line what we're doing well and going, we need to game plan for these two tens, and us having no backup plan as a result. I think it's something we both brought up in that squad building video where we said we needed an alternative to what, you know, Vitor's plan A was, to then go out and first of all ignore potential targets in the market, but then also clear the decks of any winger that we might have had available to us is just so frustrating. You know, you look at the academy. Even what does Mateus Mane have to do to get even a sub appearance at this point? He's
The bench on
electric.
some
He's
Saturday.
the
Oh my
bench.
god.
He's This kid is gonna be really, really, really good. Um, I think you're looking at a player who will at least be a comfortable championship level player, and with the right sort of guidance and experience, he could well be a Premier League player in future. Instead of giving us that option off the bench, we're packing it with six defenders. And I think also there is a psychological thing here as well, where you can say, when we're 1-0 down against Sunderland and we're playing in ourselves or within ourselves, sorry, and things just aren't working the way we're doing them, Mateus Mane might not be the long term option off the bench that we need. But he's not infected by this complete lack of or crisis of confidence that the rest of the squad have. He will get on the ball and he'll drive at a player, and he's not going to think, Christ, I'm in a Premier League game here. I shouldn't do X, Y, Z. He's going to get on the ball and he's going to play like he does at under 21s level. Sometimes that just drags you up the pitch. Sometimes it gives the side a bit of belief because they go, you know what, he's doing it, so why can't we? But we hamstring ourselves because for some reason we'd prefer to pack that bench with six defenders and Tolu, who is going to be a good goal scorer, I'd hope, but is not going to offer a change in dimension to what we were already doing with Strand Larson.
Yeah, it's yeah that the fact that we've only had two absentees at the weekend in Bellegarde and Huang, and then ended up with the bench like that is, and I said we wouldn't talk about new signings and stuff before we recorded, but we've filled up the squad quota to such an extent that if we did want to bring in a new player to fill that one space that there is, they have to be either English or under 21 or homegrown or under 21. Otherwise, we're having to obviously cut back at some of the options that we've got. But that is a January transfer window problem. To kind of wrap up, Dan, I mean, Burnley is a massive, massive game for many reasons. To my mind, if we were to lose that game, you cannot come back from within 8 games at the start of the season, having lost to the three newly promoted clubs. That, to my mind, is a sackable offence as a established Premier League team. Um, so we could be talking one game to save your job territory. How do you set up?
Oh, one game set. I think I made note of the improvement in the defensive numbers since we went to the four, and it is quite stark. Like, we have genuinely improved. We've gone from conceding about one and a half expected goals per game in those first 5 games of the season to about 0.7, which is good. The sample size is small and the data is going to be noisy as a result. You have to take into account things like strength of schedule as well. We've not, the Tottenham side that we played, the data doesn't really like them. They've not been great. Brighton and Sunderland, they're not as potent as the Man Cities, Bournemouth of the world. Um, I'd be tempted to go against what the data is saying and go back to the back three, um, purely because I think it gives us the best opportunity to get something out of Arias. And if it's not Arias, then it gives us the best chance to get something out of Fer Lopez. Play one of them in that right 10 role behind Strand Larsen. Um, get Agbadu back in at central centre back role. Have some faith in the fact that these misplaced passes that he's playing are just a blip, and that what we thought we had 6 months ago is indeed what we do have, a really high class centre back. Chachua at right back, or right wing back, I should say. Andre and João Gomez in the middle. Please no Minetzi is all I can say. That's all the time I'm going to give it. And then probably Hugo Bueno at left wing back. But if you were to come to me with a decent back four that, or system that includes a back four, I should say, that is going to create some chances against Burnley, then I'd say I don't really have an argument against it, because the data is starting to show that maybe we've turned a little bit of a corner, at least defensively.
I'm glad you've gone that way because I'm in total agreement. I think we have to, as the home team in the game, try and take the initiative, try and score the first goal. And I don't think we're going to do that with the way he's setting the team up in attack with the back four system. Um, it doesn't platform any of them in the right way. It'll isolate Strand Larsen as he has been. Um, I still think the three of Arias, Strand Larsen, and Hwang could be useful and potent. I think they've all got qualities that a newly promoted football club could have issues with. Um, and yeah, Strand Larsen and Hwang are the only two players in our squad who've got a Premier League goal record to speak of, right? So that has to count for something.
Matt Doherty, to be fair.
No, that is true. That is true. Maybe he gets a slot at right centre half then, for me, but yeah, I think Abudu has to come into the team to enable that to happen and still give us that physical presence that Minetti gives us if that's what he's insistent on putting him in the team for. But yeah, I think Arias, Strand Larsen, and Hwang is where I would go with the front three. Failing that, and again, because we know he's not, keen on playing players who want to run in behind and stuff. If it's a fair Lopez, Strand Larsen, Arias front three, I think you've got to try it as well because it's probably our most enterprising group of attackers.
Would you
Um,
be shocked if he dropped Arias? Is what I was going to come on to, because I think we've sort of got ourselves into a funny position here, and I haven't seen too much conversation about it yet. But I think both Arias and Fer Lopez are competing for the same spot. They both do their best work in that right half space, and Fer Lopez does give us an interesting angle of attack there with his left foot, and you saw that in the opener against Leeds that possibly Arias wouldn't have picked out. Um, would you be shocked if he goes Fur over Arias there, just because we still haven't seen Arias play up to what we know he's capable of?
I'd be shocked if he decided to play Fair Lopez because I think that despite getting an assist and dragging him at half time against Leeds was quite telling. And to be fair, I mean, when he's not on the ball, Lopez does look like he's running in treacle,
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
which is a massive problem for Vitor, and I think it's a massive problem in the Premier League. To be told, he's not giving us the benefits in possession that outweigh that, you know, and that's having come in like in place of a player like Sarabia, who wasn't exactly famed for his work rate off the ball, right, but his intelligence and his ability to pick up positions and move into nice areas was a benefit to us, right? So, um, yeah, it's an interesting one. The idea of dropping Arias, I wouldn't be surprised if he did drop him because I feel like in his own head he thinks he should just be doing more with the way he's been played. So that's an interesting one, but yeah, it's a bit of a monumental occasion on Sunday. we the last time I remember us playing Burnley in a relegation battle, Wolves fans ended up on the pitch. Um, so
Those days are long gone.
yeah, it's who knows how toxic it could end up if things don't go our way. But I think it's been a relatively healthy discussion we've had here, Dan. So thank you for joining me. And if anyone from the club is listening, please do pass on our best wishes and thoughts and ideas over to the management team because I think we're all very keen to ensure that this doesn't continue. Um, hopefully, a good result is in the offing on Sunday. But Dan, if anybody wants to follow you, where can they find you?
Yeah, just the usual D Butler analysis on Twitter. I'm hoping to get back to writing relatively soon as well, so keep an eye out for a Substack type thing.
Right, I've been Gully, Musings from Molyneux on Twitter, and hopefully speak to you guys soon. Thanks.